Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today for our live event on the art of agile consumer insights. We know that you're all dealing with shrinking timelines, especially in the past couple of years, as well as increased pressure for faster insights to help fulfill those timelines. And in this session, we're going to hear how some experts in the industry are experiencing and addressing those challenges themselves. We have a really great panel joining us today, representing a variety of roles, industries, and different business sizes. And I think we're going to have a really great discussion. We've connected before this session and already had some really great discussion going. So I'm really looking forward to this. So we're going to introduce everyone now. I'm going to allow each panelist to introduce themselves. I'll kick us off. And when I'll call on each of you, and when you introduce yourself, can you please give us just your name, your company, and your role in your organization? So starting us off, I'm Michelle Ewell. I lead the Kantar Marketplace business at Kantar, and Kantar Marketplace is Kantar's agile research platform. So I'm going to just go around in the order that I see everybody on my screen. So David, can you kick us off with your intro?
My name is David Banks. I am the Director of Marketing at Bell Flavors and Fragrances, in charge of the marketing team and consumer research functionalities here.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Manish Pandey. I work for Fiserv, financial services technology company. And I run the product strategy and digital strategy for the company.
Great, thanks. And Ari, you're up next.
Thanks. I'm Ari Goldsmith. I lead our marketing team at KeHE. KeHE is a specialty natural and organic food distributor out of Chicago. And we have 16 warehouses across the US, about 800 trucks. And our job is to serve and feed America.
Great, thank you. And Key.
Hey everyone, I'm Key Choi. I look after a business research and insights function at Meta Platforms, and I'm super excited to engage and interact with you today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thanks so much. All right, so let's dive into the discussion. So kicking us off, I mentioned shrinking timelines and increased pressure for faster insights. That's sort of the main impetus for our discussion today. Can you each just share what your perspective is on this shifting business environment? We hear a lot of clients talk about the need to make decisions faster. Where is that pressure coming from? And which may be different across your different organizations. And then what opportunities and challenges has it been creating for your teams? This is just open for anyone who wants to jump in first.
I can jump in. So we have about 6,000 employees, and the company has grown from 700 million to 7 billion in the course of about a decade. And those growing pains include technology and also, our own intrinsic desire for decision-making to happen that much faster. So we really look at, does the data help you make the decision, and is it fast enough, or are you delayed because of the data? And also, there's the quagmire of like over-processing data when from a gut and other qualitative information on what the decisions and the go forward process may be. But I certainly think that there's both an internal and external pressure to increase the speed to market with the different information that you're processing.
And I can piggyback on that one a little bit, if that's okay, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say that, from our perspective too, so we work with, we're a flavor and fragrance and ingredient supplier, and we work with companies to bring products to market, help them ideate, help them innovate. So we would probably be working with Ari at one point in time, somewhere down the line. But the big challenge that we see is a lot of our customers have been cutting their insights teams and cutting the people back on their side. So they are then the pressure comes back to the manufacturers to produce more than we may have produced in the past. So we are now responsible for being able to not just bring in a great idea to marketplace, but also bring a great idea that's got some backing behind it, whether that's from a sensory perspective, whether that's from a consumer insight perspective, or even just a research perspective. So, our growing pains are really surrounded by being able to have those capabilities and those people. And then everything is like tomorrow, right? It needs to be done tomorrow. The speed to getting these answers back has increased dramatically, and it really does make it a challenge to get quality research and have the ability and time when that you're being asked to do 3 times more with half the people. So that's just one of the challenges we've seen.
I can go next, Michelle, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Sure. So, folks, I kind of bring a little bit different perspective. So, Fiserv, one of the largest financial technology company, we deal with banks and credit unions across the globe, and I think you'll agree that banks are kind of behind in consumer research. We have not been that proactive, in terms of understanding our consumers. And in the last question that you have in the survey, and I was kind of worried for initial few seconds when I saw the answers were not picking consumer research or consumer behavior as a top, top option. So honestly, I was a little bit concerned. But when I saw people kind of rallying behind and picking consumer behavior data is one of the key information that you're acquiring, that my nerves calm down. Now I tell you why. Look across. If there's one thing changing faster than technology today, is consumers' expectation. And there's no doubt about that. That's very significant. And technology is changing like on the fly every day. So if consumer expectation is changing even faster than that, it's not about how much research we are doing. It's not about how much personalized we are. It's about how fast we are. And if you're not fast, all the research that we are doing, it becomes obsolete in no time. So if that's the situation we are dealing into, the topic that we have for our conversation today is very, very relevant in my opinion, that how do we become very, very agile in our research? And then everything else, kind of comes after that, in my opinion. So I'll stop there for now, but that's my kind of opening comments on this topic.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
Just to add a couple things, but definitely +1 on a lot of what's already been mentioned. But simply put, I think our business continues increasing pressure, like both internally and externally, as many of the other panelists have said. But our leadership, they're really interested in not just understanding what's happening or what people think today, but identifying early signals of what will happen in the future. So I think that predicting consumer behaviors, trends, et cetera, is like of the utmost importance right now. So I think that adds kind of a unique layer of pressure on top of all the regular pressures that I guess research and marketing insights typically faces. And then outside of that, just the rate of change has also accelerated. I think the last 2 years is indicative of that. And we also face incredible amount of increasing competitive pressures as well, more and more so from all directions. So I think these all add to the pressure, but with that pressure, there's massive opportunity. I think our organization is a very kind of research and data driven one. And with that, our team kind of serves as that source of truth. And we have that massive opportunity to help influence, processes, outcomes, decisions, et cetera, from the leadership all the way top to the bottom.
That's great. That's great. So I'm hearing a lot of really interesting themes. You've each brought slightly different perspectives, but there's certainly some commonalities here too. So, fast company growth, insights departments being cut in certain places, and the need for the insights to come from perhaps a different part of their organization or a different part of the supply chain, if you will. Needs to increase to understand consumers better. Consumer demand is shifting, and consumers expecting greater speed, greater service, more personalized service. and more personalized understanding from you. And then Key ending us off with this needs to identify early signals to actually predict and to use insights as a predictive measure, as opposed to looking backward, how did we do type of measurement. So I'd love to dive into your teams a bit more and how you've been adapting your teams to adjust to these changes. What kinds of changes have you made to your team structures, training you've invested in? How have you adjusted the types of people that you're hiring in order to, both obtain and leverage insights faster?
This topic of agile research is an interesting one because to me, it's not necessarily about the research. I think agile research, it's actually a process, right? So the research is just one component of it. Of course, we want to do that quickly and with great confidence. But if you look at the different phases of what needs to happen to be successful and influence decisions, there's like three layers here. One is like the pre-research. So you think about scoping, stakeholder engagement and alignment, these type of things that help you determine what research you're going to actually do. Doing the research itself, right? What is the fastest way, the most efficient way to get the bare minimum insights that we need to drive those decisions? And then the post-research phase. So actually socializing, communicating the agile research insights that you've driven. So for us, we really needed to take a step back and say, this is not just about the tools and the research capabilities in themselves. It's the actual way that we at Meta actually make decisions. And like a lot of huge corporations, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And so even scoping research, getting the buy-in and funding and prioritization is extremely challenging. And so we took a step back and said, how do we reduce, who actually owns the pen, who actually needs to be part of that decision on the front end? So we've experimented with putting together kind of leadership, sponsorship, kind of councils on the front end of things, just a more select group of people who can kind of help us narrow that bullseye, help us define what that looks like, and ultimately make that decision so that we can move on to actually doing the research. When it comes to actually doing the research, of course, that's maybe where some of the latest technologies, but also something as basic as, creating our own proprietary audience panel. So when you look at consumers or really hard to reach audiences, for example, advertisers, businesses of all sizes, people who create content like creators and influencers, et cetera. So we've actually taken some of that in-house to try to mitigate the time required to find, recruit, and research these folks. And then on the back end, kind of standardizing, templatizing ways that we communicate and share out results, right? So whether that's standardizing PowerPoint templates, whether that's sharing some of the results on dashboards or through tools like Knowledge Hound, Tableau. So thinking about, hey, what part of our insights can be DIY and self-serve, right? Where let's say people on the frontline sales organization can come and find and identify insights that resonate to them, versus communicating in us as the research team, pushing out certain types of different deliverables, knowing well that one deliverable doesn't fit all. And so I think being really kind of creative and taking a diverse approach to disseminating our information has been kind of a key to us doing agile research. So for us, it's really kind of an experimental process where we continue to think about not just doing research quickly, but how do we get to quick and fast, actual decisions at the end of the day, of which research is just one part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it sounds like you're taking what used to be really distinct stages of a process and perhaps distinct owners of some of these stages and are really bringing them together so that you can move faster, so that it's a more seamless and faster process from the pre-research and scoping to the communicating out and acting.
I'll just add to the conversation here. I mean, in the nice old days, it was very easy for us to kind of segment a lot of things because you had a lot of time at your disposal. Now, when people say, and we used to do the same mistake as well, but now we are changing, and that's going back to Michelle, your point, what's changing. So if you think from the consumer point of view, earlier we will say that, hey, you think about consumer life cycle, you have acquisition, you have engagement with the customers, you may have attrition situations, and how do you retain them back, and so on and so forth. Now you have such a multi-dimensional relationship with the consumers. Where do you segment? Where do you define that which phase is ending where and which phase is starting where? Absolutely, you can't really do that. Plus, you have 360-degree view of consumers coming from so different sources. So one of the things that changed, in our opinion, in our approach, is that we don't really now look at different phases, that where these consumers are in relationship with us. That's one. Second, we look at technology. And Key mentioned earlier on, I mean, it's not about catch-up job. You cannot just look at catching up with the information and then anticipate the future. It won't happen. You have to use a technology like machine learning and AI and be ahead in the game. Now, of course, we are not God. We can't predict the future, right? But the technology is going to help you kind of simulate the situation and see what might happen. And that's where you see things like next best action, right? When in our banking world, we talk about when the consumer is talking to you, you need to think about what is the next best action you can take with the customer, whether you're selling a new product or you're talking service. And if you think about the concepts being used in other retailers like Amazon, right? People who bought this also bought that. And where is this coming from? We all understand that, right? So that's another change we made in ourselves, that, hey, how do we anticipate that future behavior? And then the third thing we talked about is that how do we communicate that information? So, and this is a real situation, right? I mean, we all think that, I can mail so many promotions to somebody and hoping that person will check the mail and pick up the mail and take some action on that. But I may not be a mail person. I may be a text person. How do you make sure that you are communicating to me in the language or preference that is applicable to me? And that's really, really important, in my opinion, because that's where the timing comes in picture. You may have a very good offer for me, but I moved on. Your mail came 5 days later. I don't need this anymore. I was walking in a mall at around the lunchtime, and I'm doing my shopping, and I felt hungry. If I get a text that point of time that, hey, there's a Panera bread nearby, here is a 10% discount coupon, go and use that. That's a timely intervention in my life cycle. So that's another change we made, that how do we communicate that timely information to the consumers, once we have, realized what could be the action, what's the need, and then get that message in the timely manner. Second, with the channel they prefer to interact with.
Yeah, the processes are not only less linear now, where we're needing to optimize and make decisions on the fly, and make optimize, look at data, where it's really just one seamless process. But it's also becoming more personalized and less about evaluating segments of groups or large groups of people, but everything is much needs to be much more personalized in terms of the insights we collect and how we act on them.
Let me jump on that really quickly, Michelle. I think our team, in the initial question came around kind of team structure and changes you've made. So the teams that I've been responsible for building over the past 10, 15 years, I always look at my group as the storytellers, right? We are the ones who have multiple data sources that we can pull together a story, but it really has to be a story that not only resonates with the customer that we're talking to, but ultimately the consumer that you're trying to reach, right? So yeah, I agree with Manish a lot. It has to be personalized to your language, right? People want to be talked to, not talked at. They want to feel like you're talking their language. And especially when we're talking about the food and beverage industry, people use different descriptors to name different things. And, and we might call it, it's a fancy name like fougere, but it may just be something like, mossy or oaky. We have different ways of doing it, but I think that personalization is critical. I think, having a robust toolbox, and this is what we also employ here. So having multiple options that you can quickly attach to the need of the customer is also a critical thing. So, having one way to reach them via a text message, having a way to reach them via video, having a way to reach them via their phones, having a way, whatever the interaction point is, it's got to be critical, it's got to be personalized, and it's got to be something that you have the ability to kind of play with on a daily basis. Because I agree, you got to catch them in the moment. If you're asking them about breakfast, you might want to talk to them at breakfast time, right? And you can do that these days, and you might want to talk to the right people. So targeting is really important. But my team, hiring different skill sets, I mean, those have evolved. Data scientists and people, even I look at economics folks as well, because they have a good mindset of being able to put together pieces and being able to look at the future and seeing what's happening. So, so I think, bringing that storytelling to life is really what my world revolves around. And yes, you need market research people, but you also need someone who can take all that market research and put it together in a way that connects it back.
I think that's a really interesting piece too, bringing it back and being the storyteller. My team is responsible for that as well. So it's really about how you deliver the data and create it well packaged, because it's not just about data, it's the insight. So what does this mean to the end user, whether that's internal or external? How are they going to act upon it and make a business decision based on what your data is telling them? And Manish, I agree with you. A lot of this is rear view. So, how do we get more predictive and have the tools that show us, out the front of the car as well, and look at the windshield to see, what we can possibly serve our customers or end users in order to be a bit more anticipatory of their needs.
And this point about storytelling, I think, is great as well, right? I mean, in the insights world, we pride ourselves on being great storytellers with data, but it's less now about writing a great novel and more about, interesting anecdotes and really digestible pieces that can be acted on, quickly enough. How are you approaching increased speed without compromise, right? So we hear concerns from clients that they want more, they want data faster, they want insights faster, they can make decisions faster, but they're often really concerned about balancing the need for that with accuracy and trust, and not just running a quick and dirty studies. How are you finding that balance right now and gaining that speed while ensuring that you have trust in the quality of insights that you're obtaining?
I can get us started off and say I think it's about centralizing the data. I mean, back in the day, it was all IT, and the technology team had all the data, and you would request the file or report that you needed. And now it's really about giving the business subject matter experts or owners access to all of it and being able to really provide the information that they need, how they need it, and not have it so highly architected and controlled.
For us, it comes down to simply stakeholder engagement and expectation setting at the end of the day. And I think, some of our kind of in-house tools and processes and capabilities, we've stood up to do faster, better research. Like I said, it's a journey, right, and a process. So we've had to, it's an educational and communications problem to solve. And so when you have something shiny and new that seems to be fast and confident, everyone's going to want to use it. You've got stakeholders coming out of the woodworks like, hey, can we use that to test X, Y, and Z? But by the way, we need it, 5 days from now. You start seeing all sorts of requests. So to try to mitigate some of those requests and to level set expectations, we've created quite a bit. We probably spent more time on documentation and kind of training and education than on the tool and capability itself, if that makes sense. And primarily, that's to ensure that anyone who considers some of our quote unquote agile solutions is very clear on what it is, what it isn't, and what the intended use case is, and who the intended users are for this. And that, while it's not foolproof, we found that educational component's key, because that helps narrow the universe of possibilities that comes your way and helps ensure that the solution itself is going to be applied and activated accordingly. So for us, that's been the tricky part, but that's kind of helped us kind of manage the right expectations that, you know, hey, this is not a 100% replacement for maybe that 3 or 6 month strategic piece of work that's going to require significant time and investment in a large team to support. So it's required some education, but we're making progress there.
I think these are great points. And I'll go back to one of the comments Ari made in the beginning. You know, if you think about 2, 3, 5 years back, I mean, IT owned the data. The question is that who really should own the data? IT should be a facilitator. They don't understand the data, how the data has to be used. You know, it's a business owner who owns the data. What we are doing right now is that saying that, hey, Mr. Business Owner, whosoever you are, if you are a customer service guy or if you are a marketing guy, you own that piece of data. Now, if you have a garbage in and garbage out, you are responsible for that because you did not clean up that, you know, if I could use, you did not clean up that shit, and you should have done that. And that's really very powerful in my opinion, because, hey, I understand my customer. If I'm a customer service functional head, it's my job to make sure that I provide that effective service to the customer. Now, for that, I need to have the right data coming to me. Who owns that? That goes back to the initial point. It's not IT. IT will provide you the data the way you want it. So that's one. So making people accountable for their piece of data. Then going back to another point, Ari mentioned that, you know, it should be centralized. Yes, it should be centralized. With everyone should have access to their component of the data. That's how you speed up the whole thing. That's how you provide the quality of the data, and you don't compromise on the you know the speed, accuracy, and all that stuff that you talked.
That's awesome.
That was fantastic. Just giving a pause in case anyone else wanted to add something.
I would just say that, you know, in a different light, when we're thinking about accuracy and information, right, a lot of the data that's available to us today isn't even things that we have to mine, right? I mean, or we have to mine them, but it's provided in the public forum for us to just use and see. So, you know, it's how you take that. I mean, like, there's been a lot of tools that have been introduced in the last 5-10 years of taking all the social media activity and being able to put sentiment around it and put all these different things and AI and future predictors. I mean, I think, you know, when you think about all the things you have available to you, those are accurate information, as accurate as you can make humans be, right? I mean, we are human beings and we are emotional beings and we are irrational and we don't say the things we mean. And we don't, even if in a survey, we do a survey, consumers can still sell us, yeah, that was great. And I'm 80% more likely to purchase that product, but then they may have a bad week and then their 87% went down to 20 or 10. So, you know, we have to think about, like, that's where I go back to the point of timeliness is critical, because everything changes, instant gratification and people wanting these things, and we can't listeners see anything for more than 12 minutes at a time or 2.5 minutes, whatever our average lifespan is now. So things have to be immediate, they have to be timely. But I think, you know, in terms of us creating accurate information, you know, there are systems out there and there are dashboarding systems and things we can give that take the information, aggregate it for us and give us a view to it. And then we can make our own interpretations. And you can streamline that across different groups, and you can give other folks their own dashboards about their customers or their mentions. And so there are ways and platforms out there that allow us to make things more visible to other stakeholders within the organization, as well as our own interpretations of what that means. But yeah, I do think you need a head of insights or a head of marketing for a reason, and a head of, you know, the different departments for reasons, because they do have their focus and their needs. But you can make accurate information more readily available these days than you could 5 years ago. I mean, dashboarding alone has dramatically changed with all these new customers and new companies out there. I mean, think about Tableau 5 years ago and now think about it today. It's like a whole other world, you know. I mean, it's so nice, and it's on your phone and it's immediate and it's always happening. So I think that's my biggest part on making it more agile and accurate, is you use what you got. But once again, you can't, it's hard to predict people because we are not rational as humans.
And I think this is a bang on. Sorry if I could just add 10 more seconds here, not to promote any brand, but there are a lot of, going back to David's point, there are a lot of data streaming capability available now that you can take them and put them over your data warehouse, and the data is there on the staging server, and you can just stream the data real time. So the information is available to you right on your fingertips. The question is that, who is controlling that and how are you using it?
It sounds like you're all sort of starting to talk about data democratization, right? And making data available, more centralized, more widely available across the organization. Also balancing that with the need for some, a head of insights to own, and oversee what are the different data sources that, the organization is using. And then certainly, I think the stakeholder management piece of it is really important, back to what Key was talking about, that it's so critical to understand how the data is going to be used, what are the expectations for it, so that you're striking that balance. So I think there's a lot more for us to talk about for sure, but I do want to make sure that we give some time for some of our attendees to ask some questions. I did see one come through while we're talking, so I'm just going to reference this one. This is from Brian Wood at United. The organization is cut off, apologies. But the question is, what if your organization is traditionally organized? So through your supervisor or through senior management, and the communication is filtered, but the industry is becoming, more competitive at the same time, and time is of the essence. Like, how do you balance the management of the decision makers and the hierarchy that's in the organization, but also ensure that communication is happening fast enough and focused on what kind of tools do you need? Anyone here can relate to that challenge?
I'll take a stab at it. So, these kind of traditional ways of working, the different layers that you have, management, I can relate to that too. And I think, sometimes like leadership or key decision makers, they don't know what they don't know. But sometimes they do know what are the critical pieces needed for them to actually pull the trigger on something or make a decision. But sometimes I think research and insights teams may not be clear on that. So I think bridging that communication gap is like a great place to start. And thinking about, in the spirit of moving quickly and confidently, can we narrow down what those decision drivers are to something manageable that we can react to very quickly? Once you've figured that out, or we've essentially done that and experimented a bit internally here. And one thing we've experimented with is kind of like decision-making, like scorecarding. And so versus having to share all the work that you've done and socialize that and training people on everything that you've discovered, really narrowing that down, enhancing focus on, the 2 or 3 key things that are templatized and presented in almost like scorecard format that you could readily produce, and something that leadership or decision makers become familiar with over time to make their decisions, I think is one thing that we've had some success with. And a very specific example is, I'm sure many of you invest in or work with like brand health trackers, right? Like, what company doesn't have one? And obviously brand trackers, we collect so much data, it's global, all sorts of audiences. It's just an overwhelming amount of insight. But we thought we narrowed down kind of the key data points into almost like brand health scorecarding, which then can take many different shapes and forms, right? So like, it could be a dynamic scorecard that's updated, a best case scenario, maybe real-time dynamic updating, or something quarterly or biannual, but something that decision makers develop a working model with, that they become familiar utilizing to then quickly pivot to decisions or identifying areas for investment. So I think that's one thing that we've done. I'm not sure if that helps, but hopefully that spurs an idea or two.
It's also about understanding what your competitive set looks like and what their parameters are, right? I mean, like you could have an apples to oranges comparison, to your point, and not even be focused on the right things. It's understanding what those judgment pieces are. And then it's building the research to support those triggers that you can actually impact and change based upon what it is that is important, right? It's the driver. So if you have to ask the right questions and have the right factors in place to be able to say, yes, customer service is above a 7, but yet what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like there's a deeper layer that if you're asking the right questions, you could say, but here's a point that is below average. So maybe it's about, on-time delivery is below average. I'm just throwing that out there. But the other 9 are on track. So, but if you don't get to the right questions and get to the right sets, you're never going to get to the right answers. So no, I think that's a good question.
One question I want to ask, we asked the attendees already, what types of technology are they using today? Where are they using AI, machine learning, automated research solutions? What are the sort of more advanced types of research tools that you're starting to use right now? And who's using AI today among our panelists?
We are not. Food is notoriously slow to adapting to technology, and we continue to push with proprietary technology and infrastructure. We do not have AI yet, and I cannot wait until we do.
We do use a lot of AI and machine learning, but it's mostly homegrown. We'll build our own, piece of software.
Okay. And Key, you had your hands up too as well.
Yeah, to be honest, we have amazing best-in-class AI, but I won't say that it's been super, super effective and useful for like the work that my team does yet. I think we're experimenting. On one end of the spectrum is things like natural language processing and just getting more from what we hear and picking up signals, and then the other end is using these type of technologies to like pull disparate different sources of data and insights together to identify key themes and next step actions. It's tricky. It's hard. I don't think we've cracked it yet, but we've been using a combination of homegrown stuff and looking at external help too.
And it sounds like you're largely using it to help process large amounts of data, not yet at the lower end or final end of the stage of pulling insights or results or predictions, if you will.
Probably slightly touching on that back end stuff, but not really hitting the nail on the head yet.
Starting to get there, but not quite.
Mixed results, let's put it that way.
Okay, interesting. And what's the level of trust?
We'll
trust the machine.
I don't know what the rating scale is, but below average to the point where we wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it with a broader audience.
Okay.
So it's really remained within the close-knit kind of pilot testing community, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It makes perfect sense.